Hi everyone, trust you all doing good. Quickly, I'll be taking you through React Native navigation with TypeScript, and I will be showing you how we come about the bottom tabs, the root navigation, how we combine them all together, how we do the stack, how we type check the screens, how we also type check we're going to be talking about type checking the navigators. We have both the bottom tab navigators, and then we have the root stack navigator or the native navigators. So we're also going to talk about how we combine these navigators. We have our bottom tab and then we have our native stack navigators. So how do we combine them? And also we will talk about how do we type check? How do we do type checking for the screens? So we'll have some screens inside our bottom tab and also have some screens inside our native navigator. So how do we type check those screens? How do we move within those screens? And then we'll also solve the issue of the navigation.goBack, why it doesn't go to the previous. So it will also be captured, and this tutorial is suitable for both beginner, intermediate, and professional. There's always something in the package for everyone. And please do endeavor to like, share, comment, and most importantly subscribe to this channel. I'll appreciate that. And this is also based on the current project that was just uploaded in the channel. You can check that out. It's an e-commerce project, full stack e-commerce project using React Native, React Native, TypeScript, Expo, MongoDB, and Redux toolkit. You are going to love that. You don't want to miss that. You can check it out in the channel. So without wasting time, let's go and get started. Let's quickly create the folder structure that we'll use for this short tutorial, and let's set up an environment for it. So quickly, I'll make a directory. Let's make a directory. Let's call it React Native tutorial. So let's call it React Native tutorial. Good. So let's navigate to React Native tutorial. So inside React Native tutorial, we're going to quickly create and set up an Expo app that I would use only for this tutorial. So I'm going to say Expo create Expo app. Let's call it navigation. So let's create the app. So okay, seeing that there's a name called navigation already, so let's just use another name so we're not wasting time. We'll just copy this and give it another name here. Let's call it React. Let's call it navigation. Okay, let me just call it navs. So let's call it navs. So our project is ready. The folder has been created successfully. The Expo app has been created successfully. So what we'll do, we'll just navigate to that folder so we can get started. So we'll do cd and then say navs. We called it navs, right? No, cd navs. So we're inside cd now. So we want to open the app in another VS window. So now say code plus. Oh. So this is our app. This is the app navs. So quickly, that's what we're going to work with now. And then let's set up a new terminal. So let's navigate to the folder one more time. That's cd navs from here, and then we'll do npx expo start. So we'll wait for Metro bundler. So good, our app has been loaded successfully. You can see this is the app. So I'm going to bring so this is where it's coming from. Let's quickly close this. If I remove this now, the screen will go blank. Good, the screen is blank now. So I need to create a new terminal so we can install all our packages, all the packages we'll be using. We can install and import them. So I'm going to navigate to navs. Navs. So we're inside the navs folder. So quickly, we are going to install some packages that we'll use. So these are the packages we will need to install for now. So let me quickly take you through the packages. I think we have 4 packages here. We have a npm install React Native navigation / native, then React Native navigations React navigation / native stack, and then we have React navigation / bottom tabs, and then we have our types, React Native vector icons. So we have 4 of them. Make sure that your spellings are correct. If not, it will throw an error. It's very important. So we'll just hit install so that everything will be installed. So you can see they've all been installed. You can see they've all been installed. So we're good to go. So quickly, we are going to create a folder structure. Let's quickly create a folder structure. So let's come into our navs here and let's create what we call source. Let's create a folder called source. Inside the source, we will have screen. Let's create a folder called screen. Let's call it screens. Okay, before we do that, let's create a file index.tsx. Remember, we're going to be using Typescript. So let's create a folder called screens now. So that's where we have all our screens. And then inside the screen, let's create a file called home screen. Home screen.tsx. Then let's create another file. Let's call it cut screen.tsx. Let's create another file. Let's call it product details screen. Let's create product details.tsx. Okay, we'll create the remaining ones subsequently. So I think that's that about this. Then another folder we want to create inside our source. Inside our source is our navigation. Let's create our navigation folder. And then inside the navigation folder, we're going to have 2 files. We're going to have tab stack navigator. And then we are going to have, okay, well, let's call it tab navigation.tsx. And then we would have, let's create the root navigator.tsx. So we're going to be using these 2 these 2 files for navigation. Then if there's any other thing, we'll create as we build. So let's start with our tab navigator. Okay, let's rename that. The name is not, we didn't spell it correctly. So let's call it tabs navigator.tsx. So we'll come inside here. We can do rn ts. So we have tsrnf. Yes. So we'll use it to create our. So we have the tabs navigator. So let's come here. We also need to import. Let's import. Okay, we can do that later. So we can get started here now. So now this tabs navigator is going to be used for our bottom screens, our bottom tabs. That's what we want to use it for. Now this is where we start from the fundamentals. Right when we are doing. So remove that too. Okay, for now, let's just ignore this error. So now, the first thing we need to do now is, since we want to create the bottom tab navigator, the bottom tab screens, and the bottom tab screens, now for us to do that, we need to create an object. We need to create an object type, which will enable us to map the route name to the params of the route. Now, for all the bottom tabs, they have route, they have screens. So the name of the screen is what we call the route name. That's what just was talking about here. So what we want to do now is we need to create an object type. That's a type that is of object that will help us to map the route name to the param name, so that we know that each screen each screen that we would have in our bottom tab, it will have a name and then the parameters that belongs to the screen. That's what we want to declare. We want to declare the name and the parameters that belongs to the screen. And then I will export it. So I will say export because we are going to be using it in our root tab, in our root navigation rather. So here you also know, you need to understand that it's a type. We don't use interface for this. The alias here is what is type. So that's why I'm writing type. So I'm going to call it a type of, let's call it tabs. Let's say tab stack param list. Tab stack param list. Let's say tab stack param list. So it's an object. Remember, we are creating an object type. So this is what we are saying. This is the object type. That tab stack param list is the object type. That's what that means there. Then that object type will be used to map for mappings. For mapping what the route name to the params. So for each route, we want to have params inside of it. So let's render the first one that we want to render in this now. We could say home. So that's the route name. And then home, we'll give it, for now, we'll give home, let's call it undefined. So that's the params. So we could have an object params list too. So that's, but the params for it now is that home is undefined. That means we're not passing any props to it for now. That's what we're saying. We can also have a cart. The cart is going to be the route name for the cart screen. So that's the route name for the cart screen. Then we are passing what parameters into it. And then some of the parameters we could pass into the cart is ID. And then we can put a question mark to show that it's optional. So even if the ID is not passed, it won't throw an error. So that's what it means. If you don't put that question mark, it means it's compulsory, it's a criteria whenever you're navigating to the cart screen. And if you are navigating to the cart screen, there have to be a parameter for ID that you must transfer from whichever screen you are to the cart screen. If not, it will throw an error. It will always ask for ID. So, but when you put a question mark, it's saying it's optional. It's either there's a value for ID, and if there's no value for ID, just make it undefined. That's what it means. So we're going to call it string. So if I go over it now, you can see showing it's either string or what undefined. So if there's no string passed into this ID, then it becomes what undefined and it won't throw an error. But if somebody passed a number into this ID, it will throw an error because it's not a type. So it has to be what string. That's what it's saying. So does it make sense? So that's it. And then so you can see that ID now is a parameter which has what a type check that we are giving what a type of string. Let's say images. So images also we want to make it optional in case an image was not passed when we were moving to the cart screen. So it becomes optional. But if an image is passed, it should look into what an array of what strings, an array of string. Then another thing we could pass is the name of the product. So we'll just make them all optional. The name of the product and the name will be what string. Another thing we could pass is the price of the product, and we'll make it equal to string as well. Another thing we could pass is, okay, for now let's just leave it here. Okay, let's just pass one more description. You can pass depending on what you're working on. So that's how you pass the parameters there. So string also, description will be also what of string. So that's what's happening. So here now for our bottom tabs, we have been able to create what the object type, which is the what tab stack param list. Then inside, and we have been able to do the mappings. So mappings from the route name and to the what, to the params. So for home is the route name. For cart for the cart screen, we are going to be using cart as the route name, and inside the cart now we have the params, and we have 1 2 3 4 5. We have 5 params that we have declared, and I've given each of them a type. So that's what we're saying by type checking the word the navigator. So we'll also do the same idea as well. We'll replicate when we get to what the root, when we get to the root navigator. So that's the first thing we want to do here. The next thing we want to do is we want to tell our navigator to use this tab stack param list. We have to tell our navigator to use it, to recognize it. So we are instantiating it, and to do that we need to import. Create bottom tab navigator. That's what we use to create this tab stack param list. So for us to do that, let's import it. We're going to import it this way and we're going to import it from @navi. Okay, let me just import it. This is it, @react navigation / bottom tabs. So that's where we're going to import it from, and then we are going to import create. You can see create bottom tab navigator. That's what we need. So that's what we need. So we'll come here. To create because we need to create the param list now. We want to tell the navigator, the bottom tab navigator, to use that tab stack param list. So we'll say constant, let's say tab stack. So we'll now use the create bottom tab navigator, and then we'll pass our tabs. Use the tab stack param list. We'll pass it into it. So we have created bottom tab navigator with that. So the next thing we want to do is, we don't want to make this bottom tab navigator static. We want to be able to add to it, not to add to it either now or later as our project demands. So as the project scope expands, when there's a requirement to add more bottom tabs, or you want to change a bottom tab, so we should be able to do that dynamically, so that without having to use a static type. So, and for us to achieve that, we will create another. So that type, we're going to give it a name. Let's call it tab stack. So stack print screen props. Let's call it tab stack print screen props. So, and for us to achieve these, we need to pass generic. The generic we're using here now is just a way of making it a placeholder, a variable, like the way we pass an empty string, so that you can easily pass something there dynamically. So whatever you pass into it, that's what you'll accept and update the tab stack param list, or extend the keys. So what we are going to do here is, we are going to pass, let's say we are passing this now, the T is our generic, is the placeholder, like the variable that we're just putting there, okay, so that you can add anything inside the box. This T will extend, it extends key of the tab stack param list. So that's the idea. That's what we are making sure the tab stack param list is not static, it's dynamic. So we can add other route name and the params into it subsequently, especially if our project demands it. So that's what we are saying here, and then we are making it equal to. So another thing is, we are going to be using what we call the composite screen props. What do we use composite screen props for? Composite screen props is simply, in a simple term, it is used to combine types from multiple navigators. Now in our project, you can see that we'll be using the bottom tab navigator, and we're going to be using the root navigator. So, and these are two different navigators. So bottom tab is a navigator on its own. Root navigator is a navigator on its own too. So we have two navigators. So we want them to be able to speak with each other, because most of the two navigators will have their own different stacks. So the bottom tab will have its own stack, and then the root navigator will have its own stack. So we want them to be able to speak with each other, to link with each other. So as a result, that's what we call combining them. So this composite screen props helps us to easily combine types from our multiple navigators. Composite screen props will take it takes two parameters. So it takes two parameters. The first parameter is, in our case now, we want to be able to combine the bottom tab to the root navigator, the bottom navigator to the root navigator. So in our case now, the bottom navigator is our primary navigator. That's what it's saying. So it takes both the primary navigator and the secondary navigator. That's just what's happening. So, but the primary navigator in our own case now is the bottom tab. That's where we want to use it from. So we can just say composite. I think it should bring it up for us. Composite screen props. If it doesn't, then let's import it. So let's just import it here. We're going to import it from React Navigation /native. /native, React Navigation /native. So we can bring our composite screen props. Look at it. So we are bringing composite screen props from there. So composite screen props, we need to import bottom tab screen props. So we come here, it's from our bottom tabs. So we want to install bottom tab screen props. Yes, bottom tab screen props. So we'll come here and bring that in, screen props, and then we'll pass our primary props, our primary type navigator, the props for the primary navigator, and the prop types for primary navigator is our tab param list. The prop type for the primary navigator is our tab param list. Our primary navigator is bottom tab in this case. So that's the first, and then we will need to pass our generic into it. That's it, and then we'll do our secondary navigator. Maybe after the primary, our secondary navigator now will now be the root navigator, which we haven't created. So let's quickly import root stack screen props. and that will come from root. It will come from our root navigator. So we haven't created that. So let's just go to our root navigator and import. So let's go to our root navigator. Where's our root navigator? And create the root stack screen props. Let's bring our root navigator here. We can close this. We don't need it for now. We can also close this. We don't need it for now. So inside here, we'll just copy this and bring it over because they're almost the same. So we'll just make adjustment to them. For now, let's comment this out. Let's comment this out and come to our root navigator. So inside our root navigator, we don't need. Let's move the things we don't need. We don't need this. We need and then we need. So in here now, this is what for the navigator. We need stack. So we'll call native stack, yes. And then here we don't need two members of native stack. So inside our native stack, we'll use what we call native stack screen props. Where's native stack screen props? Yes. And then we also create for bottom tab, we use create bottom tabs, bottom stack navigator. But here we use bottom tab navigator. But here we're going to use what? Create native stack navigator. That's what we use to create the navigator for the native stack. So another thing we'll need here is for the screen props. Let's see from here. Okay, we're not taking composite, but we'll use from native. We are not using composite. We'll not be using composite here, but we'll use another thing. We'll use navigator screen params. Yes, so we have navigator screen params. Yes, let me just type it. Navigator screen params. Yes. So we use navigator screen params here, and here we are going to call this root stack param list. So you can see they're just so inside here. Let's say, okay, let's comment this out because we'll be needing it later. But for now, we don't need it. So let's say here we're going to need, let's write product details. So product details, just the same way we created the object type for the bottom tab, we need to create the object type for the for the root stack. That you remember that's what we use for the type for checking the type checking the navigators. So here to come here and say, okay, let's just adopt some of these for now. So we are using the scenario of an e-commerce. So inside the root stack navigator now, you remember we used what we called the inside our bottom tab navigator. Sorry, you remember we use what we call composite screen props that will enable us to combine multiple screen. So this way we now come here now. We need to now link the bottom tab, the tab navigator to the root navigator. And to link the bottom tab to the root navigator, now we can just call it. You can declare the route name for it. So let's say tab stack, and inside the tab stack, so we will now use we use what we call the native stack screen props, and then we'll pass what our tab stack screen param. It's supposed to be tab stack param list. Yes, so we have our tab stack, and you see it has imported it from what tabs navigator. So this screen is what will help us to get what the params, the screen params for what tab stack param list. So this native stack screen props, it was what will help us to type check. You can see it's bringing them out. This is cool, isn't it? So the native stack screen props will help us to type check the screens, the params inside the tab stack param list. So it helps us to get it and type check it. So that's what's doing there, and that's all. So we'll come here. Let's finish up with this. So this is not. So here we'll now create. Here we'll create native. Yes, create native stack navigator, because that's what we're going to use here, and then we are going to link it to what our root stack param list instead. So we are creating and linking it to our root stack param list, and here it will also extend the key of. So we're using root stack param list, and then we're not using composite. So we'll just come here. We don't need composite here. Remove composite, and then so extend the key of, so that we can also extend the keys, the parameter, the props for what our root stack param list. So here we're going to be using the native stack. Okay, let me just remove all this. Oosh. So here we are going to be using the native stack screen props, and we're going to be using it to get what we're using it to type check the screens of what our root stack of our root navigator. So we need to check the screens. So it will be equal to what we'll pass what the param list, the root stack param list, and then we're going to recognize what the generic so that it can be added into, we can add into it. So, and you see everything is working out fine. So what it's saying now here now is the native stack screen props will help us to type check the screens, and the screens inside where? Inside what our root stack param list. And inside the root stack param list, we have also passed what the bottom tab, which is this tab stack. And you see, and we're using it to also to type check what we're using the native screen props to type check the tab stack, the screens of what the bottom tab, which is what tab stack param list. That's what's happening. So we can remove this. We don't need this anymore here. So we're just going to leave it like this. And you can see our bottom tab is fine. So we're going to change the name also. We need to change the name also. The name is not tab stack. So we're going to make it root stack or root navigator. So let's make it root navigator. This is root navigator. And so we just leave our return. We'll come back to the return function shortly. So we'll export default root navigator. Cool. So we can save this. Let's come to our tab navigator. So here now we can now bring in what the root stack screen props. That means this. Oh, sorry, we did not. Yes, it's not supposed to be the tab stack. So it will be the root stack. Let's call it. Okay. So I'm going to just remove the tabs and call it. This is the root stack screen props. Yes. So this is it. So this is what we'll now bring into here, so that we can combine the two navigators together. So we'll now say root stack screen props. You can see it's root stack screen prop from root navigator. So we'll bring it, and then root stack screen props will declare the parameters. There are two parameters inside it, and the first one. So the first one is the root stack. Sorry. It takes one. So we're passing. So here we'll now pass. You can see. So it's bringing up what all the stack in it, and then the one we need is the tab stack, because that's what we want to combine with the root stack. And this is what it is called, what the tab stack. Where is it? We call it the tab stack here. We call it the tab stack. This is it. And you can see it automatically populated it. It brought it up for us, and it brought two. We only had two. We only had tab stack and what product details. So, and the one we want to link it to, we want to combine together, is a tab stack. So we don't need this as well. We just remove it, and then we are good to go. That's it. That's all. So we're good to go. So basically now you can add to what the tab stack param list. You can add more screens depending on the number of screens you want to have. So let's say, for example, I want to add the profile screen, for example. So you can see the idea. So this generic helps us to expand the scope and add more screen, more route, more params, more props into this. So the profile screen, we can just say, okay, let's say for now, let's just say profile is also undefined. For now, we've not defined these types in it. So let's just say undefined. Let's add one more too. Let's add payment. You can add anything you like. It's up to you depending on your scope. So payment will be undefined. So we've been able to add 4 different screens in here now, 4 different props, 4 different param lists into our tab stack param list. So we've been able to have 4 different screens, 4 different route name with their parameters, with their params. So we have the home, the cart, the profile, and the payment route. So that's what we'll be using. So quickly come and let's create the bottom tab screens. We need to create the bottom tab navigator and the bottom tab screen so that we can actually render the screens in our app. So we'll come inside this place. We'll come inside this our return. Let's remove this. We won't be needing this anymore. So we'll come here, and then the first thing is we're going to take our tab stack, because that's now we now actually want to create. We want to create and display the tabs. We want to display the bottom tabs. We have created the bottom tab using create bottom tab navigator. So now we want to create the screen for it. So we'll say bottom tab stack, So inside bottom tab stack, we'll have what we call navigator. You can see we have navigator and string. So the first thing is we'll create the navigator, and inside the navigator, we'll create the screens. So inside the navigators, we're going to pass some parameters into it. We're going to give it, let's give it a screen options. Screen options. And we don't want it to show the tab bar label. Tab bar label. So tab bar label will make it false. And that's all we need to do. So to create the screens now, we need to also take tab stack.screen, tab.screen, and then inside our screen now, the screen, we now want to start using we need to start passing the route name. We need to pass the route name for the first screen we want to create, and then we need to link it up with a component. The component name. The component name is what we declared inside our screens. So we need to pass them and link them together. So the first one now is the route name that we use to create the route, the navigation. So if you're navigating to somewhere, there must be a route. So the route name now we are going to use. Let's start. The first one we want to render is the home screen. Is the home. So we'll come here and say home. You can come here and say home. So inside home, we need to have the component, and then so for the component, for us to do the component perfectly, we also need to link it to the home. If not, it won't work. So we'll come here. Okay, let me just write the component home screen, because I want to show you something. Home screen. So you can see it's throwing an error because home screen, there's no JSX. You see, it says cannot find the home screen because there's no JSX in that. So we'll come to our home screen now. Let's create the JSX and the return function so that we can have our home screen displayed. So we'll come here inside our home screen. Okay, let's do RNFS. Yeah. So what I'm using there is tsrnfs. So we'll come to our home screen. Let's call it home screen. Let's call it home screen. Yes. So let's call it home screen. And it's our home screen now. What we'll do, we'll remove this type for now. And then we'll come here. You see what will happen shortly. So we're going to create a navigation. And then we're going to create the route. So before that, we need to import. Let's import the tab stack screen props that will help us to check the screens. We're using it to check the screen. So we're going to bring it from navigation. Yes, from navigation, right? Yes, and then we are bringing the tab navigator. Yes, tabs navigator. That's the thing. So inside the tabs navigator, we have. So we need to bring the tab stack. You see, tab stack screen props. That's the thing. Makes sense, right? So we'll come to our home here. Okay, let's just, you see what will happen. Let me remove this. I'll remove these and come to our home here and then say, we'll say tab stack. Where is it? The tab stack screen props. That's it. And then we'll put our navigation. It'll bring the navigation and then the route. We have the navigation, we have the route in it. And just look at something very shortly. So inside there, you can see this is beautiful. You can see it's bringing up all the screens inside our tab navigation, and we have 4 screens there. We have the cart is bringing out the route name. So the home, the cart, the profile, and the payment. This is awesome. That's the power of TypeScript. So it's bringing up all the route name. So we can just choose. See, this is really awesome, isn't it? So you just choose. Now what we are rendering here is the home. So the home screen. So you see we've been able to pass the route name, which is home, to it. So that's the idea. And then we'll come here. And then, okay, we already have our render. We already have our render, our return function. So return is in here already. So we can come here now. Where's our tab navigator? And you see it will import our home screen. You see, cool. This is beautiful. See, it has been linked up, and you see the error has gone. It has imported the home screen. So quickly, inside our tab navigator, we want to also pass some other. So we want to pass options, and then header shown. We don't want to show the header shown. Header shown, make it false. Oh, it's supposed to be double curly bracket. Yeah, Yes, the error is gone. So header shown false. We don't also want, let's work on the tab bar icon. The tab bar icon. So we want to give all the bottom tabs, all the screen. We want to give those bottom tabs, we want to give them a definite icon. We want to give them a definite name and a definite icon. And to do that, we'll be using vector icons. So another thing we want to do is we want to check if the icon is focused. That means that's where the user is currently. If the user is at that screen. And when the user is at that screen, we want to give that icon a different color. So we're going to say when the icon is focused. So focused. If the icon is focused, we're going to say, so if the icon is focused, else give it another star. So we're going to bring the 2. So we're going to say tab stack. Oh, sorry, I'm supposed to put, yeah. So if it's focused, sorry, push. It's supposed to be a callback function. And we're passing a parameter focused. Yes, so that's the thing. It's a callback function. So what we use is, let's import. So we're going to import. So let's say vector icon. So it's supposed to be at export / vector icons. Yes, so we have n typo from it, and then we also need, I think we also need ant design. So let me just import everything at once, and we also need iron icons. So let's just import everything at once. So come here. If it's focused, we want to render an n typo. And then we have a name, so our name equals to, let's work on home, set n typo, let's give size of 24, and give the color of, let's give the color, so I'm going to be a string, and then something. And it's a component. So it's focused. We give all these, but it's not focused. We come here and design. So let's call this and design. And that design is going to have, it's also called home and design, and we're going to give it a different color. Let's give it color black for now. So that's the where coming from. That's the screen. Oh, sorry, the tab stack is also supposed to be a self-closing component. Yeah, that's why the error is coming. That's why we have the error. The error will go off now. Okay. You can see the error is off. Okay, tab bar show label. Yeah. So you see the error is gone. So that's it. So, and that's all we have to do, and then we have our home screen. So the next thing is we can just copy this, just copy the same thing and render for all the other screens that you want. Okay, so we can just copy this. Okay, let's just leave it, and then quickly let's go and write for our root navigator as well. So if you come to our root navigator, so you see we have actually created all the navigations for the tab stack, the one that we will need, and then inside our root navigator we have also create what the native stack navigator. We've created it, so we also need we need to render it. We need to now call it so that it can be used. And just the same way we wrote this, so that we won't waste time, we will just come here and call it. So to do that, we also have let's call this root navigator. Sorry, so let's call it root stack, not tab stack now. Let's call it root stack. So we can come here and call our root stack. So our root stack, it will have navigator too. And then we'll have we also have root stack. Then we have the screens. Just the same method. So we have the screen, and it will also be self-closing tag. So inside the screen here. So inside the screen here, we want to, the first screen we want to render in our own case, the first screen we want to render is the tab stack, because the first screen we want to render is actually is the home. Now in our own case, the first screen we want to render is the home, and the home is inside the bottom tab, is inside the tab stack, and the bottom tab is saved here inside the tab stack. Because if you see now, if you come here, it's inside the tab stack home. So that's the first screen we want to render. So you must also understand it's a stack. So the order is very important. The screen you want to come first should be the first on the list. What we'll do here is what we'll call the tab stack. You can see, and it's showing us, it's giving us. So that's tab stack. And the tab stack, we're going to, the component, there's a component we want to render inside the component inside the tab stack. The component will be equal to the tabs navigator. So tabs navigator, we import it. So tabs navigator, and then we can give it options. We don't want the header to be shown too. We want to display our own header. So we'll say header shown. That's what we call header shown. Yes. Header shown will be false. We want to display our own header. That's what we're just doing. And that's it. So we can copy this for other screens. So after our tab stack, okay, we created a product details screen. So we can just come here. Let's just come here and say product details. So we just copy and paste, and this will no longer be the tab stack. So we'll give the route name. The route name is what did we call the route name here? Is product details. So product details. Product details. So you can see it has recognized product details, and the name of the component is equal to product details, but we haven't. So let's come to our product details, and then TS RNS. So TS RNS, and then we're going to call it product details screen. So let's do product details, and product details come here. We also need to import. So now, in the case of the bottom tabs, we imported what we call in our home. We imported what we call tab stack screen props. But because product detail belongs to the root stack, we will also import what root stack screen props. So that's the idea. Remember, that's what we use to type check the screens. So that's why it is very important. So we'll come here because we need to type check the screen. So we import from navigation, and then from root navigator, from root navigator, and inside the root navigator we can have what? Root stack screen props. Yes. So we'll come here, and to do that, we'll come in here, and then we are going to map it to, we're going to connect it to our root stack screen props, and inside there we can have our navigation, and then we have our route. Cool. And you see what will happen? It will bring those screens. You see, this is beautiful. So this is beautiful. You can see, so we can just select what our product details. So you see, it constrains it. Any screen or any route name that is not defined in the scope in our root navigator, you cannot pass it. That's it. So strict. This is beautiful, isn't it? So you see our product detail, and this is it. So we can now come back to our root navigator, and you can see the error is gone. So if we come there now, and then we can now pass our product details. So we've linked it, and then we can press our product details screen. Good. You can see it's bringing it up. So let me take this to this side so you can see it. Product, you can see. Boom, and then we are good to go. This is beautiful, isn't it? So the next thing we need to do now, we need to take all this now and wrap it in our app so that we can view it. So we'll come to our app.tsx here. So we'll come to our app.tsx here, and then we need to import. Let's import the root navigator, because that's the root navigator. All the screens, all the navigators have been combined in the root navigator. So the only thing we need to import now is the root navigator. So we're going to import the root navigator. You can see it's already bringing it up. So we import it, and then we also need, okay, I think that's all we need for now. Okay, we also need to import our navigation container. Yes. So that we'll use to wrap our entire app. So we need to import. Navigation container will come from React Navigation/native, and then we have what we call navigation container. That's it. So that's it. So we'll come here now, and then we'll remove this. Let's remove these and put our navigation container. So we use it to wrap our entire app. So, and inside the navigation container, we'll pass our root navigator. That's all you need to do. And that's it. So we're good to go. So we'll pass our root navigator into it now. So we'll come here and then save this as well. So we've got an error. Okay, so we'll address that later, but for now, let's just comment it out. We'll address it. And then you see we have a code. You see we have our home we have our home tab at the bottom. It is beautiful, isn't it? So let's quickly render another screen. So let's come here now, tab navigator, and let's render this. So we'll call this cart. We have cart, and then it's going to render our cart screen. Let's see, okay. Oh, yes, okay. Let's remove this. So let's bring our cart screen up. Let's bring our cart screen up here, and then copy our home screen, dump it to our cart screen. So we made a mistake in the cart screen name is TSX. So we'll remove that. Yes. So it's working. So what we just need to do here is change this to cart screen. We have cart screen, cart screen. And then when we come here, it's not going to be home, it will be what? Cart. Cool. You can see this is beautiful, isn't it? And in here we can call it, okay, let's style this a little. Let's say, let's give it a star. Let's imagine of 70. So you can see it. Let's give this a style too. Let's give it style. Let's give it color black. Let's give it color black. Let's give it size. Let's give it size. Font size of, let's give it of 18. Let's text line center. So line center. So now let's do this way, and then let's do the same thing and bring it to all. Let's copy the same thing, bring it to all. Let's create 2 other screens for payment. Let's create payment screen.tsx, and then let's create profile screen. Yes, profile screen.tsx. So inside profile screen, we'll come here, change it. It'll bring it up for us. So profile screen here. Let's copy this card. I'll call it profile screen. So profile screen. I think that's all we need to do here as well. So let's copy these and then bring it to payment, and then we'll copy the remove this. So type anything that's not within this browser name, that's beautiful. So we'll call it payment screen. Payment screen. So we'll go. So let's go with every of them. So we can just go there. Close, yes, profile screen. Card screen. Let's go from here. Let's card. So we'll go back to our navigator here, and then we actually do the screen. That's beautiful. So we'll just come here and add these 2 more times. 2 more times. And then this one we call these we call it a profile. So we have profile, and then we have profile screen, yeah. And then we bring this and call it payment. So we call it payment. See, that's the name for it. It's screen already. Payment, yes, payment. Let's copy it here. So let's say payment screen, and it's working out fine. So that's it. So if I save it now, we should have 4 bottom tabs. We should have 4 icons. Cool. This is beautiful, isn't it? This is really beautiful. So quickly we are going to give them, it seems they are using the same icon. So quickly we are going to give them different icons. So for, let's say for cards, okay, let's go for payment. So payment screen now, what? Let's use the icon for icon that payment analytics. So we are just going to change this one. Let's use icon. Okay, let's see how we use icons. Let's see we have card. Let's have card. So let's change this icon and then card. Let's see what we have there. Good. So we'll come here. So our profile screen, let's use an icon as well. So what do we have? We have person. And use person outline here. Person outline. Yes. And then here we have person. Sorry. Okay, sorry. So we have person here. Open icons. Yeah. And icons. And then for our card screen, we're going to use and design. I think it's and design. We have shopping cart. We have shopping cart inside and design. No shopping cart. Shopping cart. Yes, correct. Then we have shopping cart as well. Shopping cart and design. Good. So if we save them now, we are supposed to have good. We have different icons. So if I navigate to cart screen, you can see when it's focused on the cart screen, you can see the color change and the other colors remain black, and you can see we have cart screen. This is beautiful. We have profile screen. This is beautiful, isn't it? So let me just enlarge the app. You can see this is beautiful, and when I go here, we have payment screen. This is beautiful, and then we come back here and they say it's changing real time. This is cool, isn't it? So that's the idea. So let's come back to our road navigator and see where the problem here came from. Export default. We have the product details. Let's come to our road navigator. So for our road navigator, what didn't we do? Okay, let me bring it up and see why it's throwing that error. So I have the product details. So probably we didn't save the product details screen. So let's save it. I've saved it, and let's try it again. Yeah, it's working. So we didn't save the product details screen the other time, so I just have to press Ctrl S because everything is fine, and I came back to it and everything is working perfectly fine. So before I go, there's one problem we also want to talk about. A lot of people have talked about not being able to, when they use the navigation.goBack, it doesn't go back to the previous screen. So let's quickly address that here now. This is what's actually going on. Let's say for example you're at home screen. If you go back to our tab navigator, in our tab navigator, always remember that there are 2 navigators that we are using here now. There are 2 navigators. We have the first navigator for the bottom tab navigation, and then we have the second navigator, which is the native navigation, the root navigator that we use for other screens that is not inside all the bottom tabs. Now the bottom tab has its own stacks. It has its own screens that are stacked upon each other, and that's why we have here now, we have we have the home, we have the cart, we have the profile, and then we have the payment. That is a stack of screens. Now, when we come to our root navigator also has its own word stack. In our own case now, the only stack we created for this tutorial now is just the product details and the tab stack. Now, we could have a situation where we have the login screen, we have the address form, the checkout screen. So all this is likely going to be stacked into the root navigator, because you cannot pass all these. You cannot be passing login page into your tab, into your bottom tabs. Doesn't make sense that way. Neither can you also pass the checkout icon into the bottom tab. The whole place will be too populated. So all these screens are not necessarily rendered from the bottom tabs. So they are rendered from what? From the root navigator. So as a result of that, they have their different stacks. They have their different member. They have their different family. Like for the root navigator now, let's say for example I passed another screen here. Let's say I pass another screen here. Let's say maybe we pass. Maybe we'll call this, let's say this is checkout, for example. Let's say this is checkout detail. You see, it's not there. That's why it's throwing an error. So that's another stack. So in the stack now, we have what the tabs navigator, we have the product details, and we have the checkout details. But in the ordinary sense of it, the screens so if you navigate from checkout details and maybe from product details, you navigate toward the checkout details and you use navigation.goBack, it will go back to the product details because they are directly related. They are screens that are directly related to each other. They belong to the same stack. They belong to the root, to the same navigator. So, but let's say you are in home screen, for example, and from home screen, okay, let's say you are in cart screen. You know, after product details, you've added the product to cart. You want to go to the cart so that you can do the checkout and do update of the product. You want to increase quantity. So you go to, now means you go from product details now to the cart screen. Now remember that product detail belongs to the root navigator, whereas the cart screen belongs to what? The bottom tab navigator. So if you move from cart screen and you go back now, expecting to go back to product details, it won't work. Why? Because cart is a member of bottom tab and it has its own stack. Immediately you went into cart screen, it has changed the stack. It's now recognizing the bottom tab stack, the screen of the stacks of the bottom tab. So if you go back, that's why, let's say for example, from product details to cart screen, and from cart screen back to you want to go back to product details. Instead of it to go back to product details, by the time you press that navigation.goBack, it will look through and discover that the last screen you were is not part of the params. It's not part of the params of bottom tabs. So because of that, it will go and render the first route in the bottom tab, in the list of bottom tab params, which is what? Home in our case. So instead of it to go back to your product details, it will go back to what? Home, because product details is not a member of the bottom tab params. So that's where the issue is coming from. So you need to recognize that they belong to two different navigators. So how do you fix the problem now? It's now up to your own scope and discretion. Now we know when it comes to e-commerce, we know that usually if you move from product details to cart screen, yes. So, and we want to go back, all you just need to do is bring the params, add the params of the cart screen into the root stack. That's what you need to do, and the problem will be solved. So in this case now, we bring cart into the root navigator. So when we bring cart into the root navigator, we can now also render it. So we come here and then we render what we call what's it called? That's a cart screen. That's it. And then here is cart. So that's the idea. So you need to recognize that screen in the root navigator too. So majorly in e-commerce, you always move between that cart screen and cart screen, which belongs to the bottom tab, and then within the other screens that belongs to the root that belongs to the root navigator. So depending on this, how you want to navigate, you just have to bring those screens to the root stack. Or if I won't advise you to bring them to the bottom tab as well, but you just make sure you duplicate those screens at your root navigator, even if you are not going to the screen yet, so that when you navigate amongst these screens, it will recognize it. It will have it as a member of the root navigator. That's just the idea. So in summary, just make sure you can just just to save yourself from the problem, just bring all the screens in your bottom tabs and duplicate them in your root navigator, and the problem will be solved. And when you do your go back, it will go exactly to where you want it to be. I hope that saved it. So we're just going to leave it here. Please do ensure to check the full project. The full project, you see it, that e-commerce project. You see all the examples, all the real-time situations, and how we navigate from all the different screens. And you're going to love the project. It's exciting. You're going to learn a lot from it. And then do remember to subscribe. Do remember to like, to share, and I await your comments and feedback. Thank you very much.